this
for
is food
sure.
for awakening and
Mhm.
ascension? What if
Yeah.
it is? I mean, scientists doesn't.
I like how you say that, food for consciousness, because I
Yeah,
was actually
food for
just having
consciousness.
this conversation with someone else about psilocybin and how, there's all these judgments around psilocybin, LSD, and yet we have alcohol available and we have opioids that do, nothing but numb us and don't help us expand our consciousness, but they're readily available. People are like highly addicted, and yet the FDA still has them on the market and says, yeah, go ahead. I mean, it's just a little bit of a bizarre thing. Welcome to another edition of Psychedelic Sages, where we provide intuitive insights, truth bust, and serve as watchdogs and guides for topics around spiritual medicines, more commonly referred to as psychedelics. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Psychedelic Sages. I'm Beth Bell.
I'm Stephanie Salt.
And today we thought we would take a review of LSD. It's a molecule that's been around for quite some time, and there's a nice little clip on this. So let's just jump right in.
Whether that's one of the best Beatles songs of all time or just a weird song about LSD is up for debate. But what is LSD, and is it actually dangerous? Hey guys, Julia here for D-News. When you hear LSD, you might think of a Beatles song or a little piece of white paper that'll take you on a trip, man. While both heralded as a mind-expanding wonder drug or derided as dangerous and triggering delusions, LSD holds some power in our collective imagination. But what is it? LSD is a derivative of ergot. If that's familiar to you, it's because ergot is a fungus that frequently grows on rye and wheat. And sometimes that's baked into bread that people eat, and some young girls start tripping on the fungus, and then suddenly the villagers decide to kill a whole bunch of people for being witches. Seriously, ergot probably caused the Salem Witch Trials. In small doses, ergot was used as medicine for centuries. It was used to aid childbirth, to quicken delivery, and stop bleeding afterwards. So naturally, a pharmaceutical company looked into its potential benefits in the early decades of the 20th century. One guy at the company, chemist Albert Hofmann, was tasked with isolating the compounds and trying to synthesize it by other means so that maybe it wouldn't kill you? In 1938, he tried a few variations, but not with much success. On a few animal experiments, however, he noticed that one variation, lysergic acid diethylamide 25 or LSD-25, had a strange effect on the mice. They acted excited for some reason. But still, the company didn't think much of the compound and mostly forgot about it. Hoffman, however, couldn't stop thinking about it and those excited animals.
So I wanted to pause it there for a minute because there was kind of a lot of information that started to build up. I mean, ergot, right? And I thought her comment about the Salem Witch Trials was really interesting. So that people, actually had potentially some trace amounts of ergot, which is what LSD was created from, or at least looked at as a molecule. So yeah, what did that hit you at all as far as like what might have happened back then?
Oh yes, yes, but women in particular, it made them even more prophetic than they probably were in the first place. It made them download all the information about which plants to use. Where'd they get that from? Like, so it made them stand out. And when you stand out in a community like that, that's been kind of isolated for like hundreds of years with the same thing over and over, and all of a sudden you get these brilliant super goddesses,
Yeah.
of course they would be seen as something demonic or witches or something, or women with extrasensory and very real power. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I just forgot about ergot actually. And of course, we know that LSD was designed in a lab, and I think they're going to talk about that a little bit more. But if you're not that familiar, you may think of LSD as just a street drug or something, but it really wasn't. It was born out of a pharmaceutical lab, as they said. So I'm interested to hear, what more that they're going to say about it.
A few years later, he tried to recreate the compound, but one day while working on it, he felt a little strange. He went home and laid down, and well, he tripped the heck out. But he couldn't figure out what did it. He knew LSD could be poisonous, so he took extra precautions to avoid ingestion. So he concluded that he absorbed a tiny amount of LSD through his fingertips. Well, he made the compound and proceeded to experiment on himself for a while, and the rest is history. LSD became a centerpiece of the counterculture movement in the 1960s after the patents expired. Millions saw it as a way to expand their spiritual horizons. But soon there was a cultural and literal crackdown on any sort of drug, and LSD became illegal in 1968. Since then, it's been really difficult to study in a lab because of legal restrictions. I mean, it's hard to get funding for something that's still technically illegal. It's still classified by the Drug Enforcement Administration as a Schedule I drug, labeling it as one of the most dangerous drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. But from early experiments and a few recent ones, we know some things about the drug. It works in a few ways. One study published in the journal Cell Press found that hallucinogens like LSD work on serotonin receptors in the brain called 5-HT2A receptors. While you might know serotonin is the feel-good drug, it actually has a number of different uses in the brain. Claire Stanford, a psychopharmacologist at University College London, thinks that serotonin helps keep a handle on perception and actually stops us from hallucinating. So by blocking the serotonin receptors in your brain with LSD, your brain just kind of loses its grip on perception. Or another idea, Andrew Sewell, a Yale psychiatrist who studies psychedelic drugs, thinks that LSD enhances some part of your perception, that such drugs lower activity in your thalamus. It sits at the center of your brain and filters your sensory information from all your nerves. Sewell thinks that by dampening down this filter, you become more aware of the information actually coming into your system. So sights and sounds become louder or brighter, and you might start seeing things you never noticed before. Or you might just start seeing things, period. But anyways, is this mind-altering drug dangerous?
I like that they're really digging into, how does LSD work? Because we still don't know how a lot of the psychedelics are actually working. I mean, we know about neuroplasticity, we know about, the default mode network and down-regulating that and allowing our minds, our ego minds to step aside and access, some people want to call it hallucinations, but our ability to see things in other dimensional realms. Any thoughts on that part of the clip?
Absolutely. That's the whole thing. I think the reason was shut down to show us that there are other dimensions other than this, seemingly obvious earth plane. And when people do see other dimensions, it gives them the ability to download information from those dimensions as well. Some of them can help humanity. And I believe that's how we get some of the great pharmacology. That's how we get some of the great inventions that we have. The other thing about the ability to expand consciousness is, and it kind of goes back to the Salem thing too, I just thought about when we were watching the clip, was that these women had a tendency to live longer as well. And they couldn't figure out, because at that time they were dying pretty young.
Yeah.
But these women in particular lasted for longer than the normal time. But I just wanted to say that so did Albert Hoffman. He lived to be over 100. So something was going on. Did he find Excelsior for longevity?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think when you don't have the level of fear and anxiety that psychedelics can help us put at bay, that of course you're going to have a longer lifespan. I'm not saying that that's the only thing, but I'm saying you're connected to source and you're connected to an energy much larger than you, but that you are a part of. Yes, your life force is going to carry you through. I'm really an advocate of brain chemistry. I'd like to go back to university and study it because, the hypothalamus and all these different centers of our brain that are, the fight or flight, and how these molecules can help regulate them so that we can have these outer dimensional experiences, right? That we can see things beyond just what meets the eye that really does exist. We just don't have as much privy to them on an everyday life because we are here as third dimensional beings having a third dimensional experience. But yeah, it's always fascinating as we learn more about the mystical aspect of what's happening when we're doing psychedelics.
Yeah, what if this is food for consciousness?
Yeah,
this is food for awakening and ascension. What if it is? I mean, some scientists don't even know what foods elevate the heart. Or some of the other vital, the lungs, the organs. But now we found something that really does make a difference in brain chemistry that you can see in the 3D.
Yeah,
So
no, I like how you say that, food for consciousness, because I was actually just having this conversation with someone else about psilocybin and how, there's all these judgments around psilocybin, LSD, and yet we have alcohol available and we have opioids that do, nothing but numb us and don't help us expand our consciousness, but they're readily available. People are like highly addicted, and yet the FDA still has them on the market and says, yeah, go ahead. I mean, it's just a little bit of a bizarre thing. And you also touched on it, that it's one of the reasons why it was deemed as bad, was because we were able to think outside of the social constructs and the paradigm that keeps us in this fear-based idea. That what does that do? It keeps us in control, right? It keeps us controlled.
Totally.
And not be the individual. And the beauty of psychedelics is that you see your individualness, but you see that as a part of the whole.
That is so true. I think, the ability to think outside the box certainly has us prepared for moving into the age of Aquarius, which is pure energy, to be able to handle that, but handle it with a open and illumined heart, in addition the open, illumined consciousness and mind space. So for me, it makes total sense that it would be coming into the mainstream, into the collective right now, because that's where it's going to do the greatest good.
Yeah. Actually, the movie Avatar comes to mind, thinking about how we could be so connected in other realms, but here on planet Earth. So she's got something else that's here left to say. So let's take a listen.
Published in the journal Lancet found that it's actually one of the least harmful drugs, both to the user and to others. I mean, when people do take it, they tend to be overly cautious, like being aware that there's a time and a place for it, like festivals in the middle of a desert. Well, there's no link between the drug and mental illness, according to one study published in the journal Psychopharmacology. And in fact, it might be beneficial for those who suffer from depression. But okay, before this sounds like some kind of wonder drug, there are some downsides, like bad trips, or one common charge aimed at the drug is that it will induce acid flashbacks, or the idea that the drug changes a person's brain so much that days, months, or years later, you'll momentarily get the hallucinations associated with the drug, which in a recent case study published in the Israel Journal of Psychiatry led to one person developing Alice in Wonderland syndrome. No, he doesn't keep falling down rabbit holes, but he does keep seeing things and people as bigger or smaller than they really are. But on the other hand, one study published in the journal Drug and Alcohol Dependence concluded that such flashbacks, or hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, as it's formally called, is incredibly rare. So either way, it's clear more research is needed on this drug, and in the past 5 years, more research is being greenlit, so hopefully we'll have more to talk about in future D-News episodes.
What are you thinking?
No, I just thought about it. I mean, having the bad trip, the repetitive flashbacks of the bad trip, I was laughing. I was like, with that kind of music, I could see how you would have repetitive because for me, it's so opposite of what needs to happen. What type of environment you should be in. I mean, if you have this heavy metal music with flat light flashing on this fantastic brain stimulating experience of opening of consciousness, I can see how, your body goes, wait a minute, it just doesn't work. This is not going together. It's not in harmony with the initial what's the word? Spiritual prescription for use of this particular substance. So for me, of course, you're going to have a bad trip.
Of course, yes. No, and we've talked about that so many times on the show about set and setting and how important that is, and the inward journey, not further giving yourself external stimulation. And she also brought up the flashbacks. And I think if something's flashing back multiple times, and again, I'm not downplaying, because sometimes these things can be scary and they cannot feel nice, but they're coming up for a reason. And it means pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, right? And so those flashbacks, I think, can be really helpful, but I understand without the right integration therapist or someone that can understand what it is you're going through, it could be really difficult. But as we've said before, there's challenging trips, but not necessarily bad trips.
No, that's just mirroring what's going on with you, things that you need to look up, look out for, cut up, cut out, purge. But it's in your face. And it will not allow you to escape whatever it is. So you're right, that could be part of the flashback process, is to rinse and repeat to see if you really got it or not. And most of us don't get it. We need to see it again and again and again. And I think that has It has very powerful meanings that need to be deciphered by you.
Yeah.
Learn the lesson.
I agree. Well, that was a good little clip and a good little overview of LSD coming from ergot and yeah, how it was inspired to come to fruition. So we'll, I'm sure, be covering LSD in many more videos to come. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. You can get more in-depth information on our Patreon site, Psychedelic Sages.